Good morning. This is Faith in Our Hometown, brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin. And now, here's your host, Father Jay Friedel.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us for another Sunday morning of Faith in Our Hometown. It's always good to spend Sunday morning with you, and I'm still always amazed that so many of you tune in and send us ideas, and I meet you in the grocery store and all those good things. But it's always good to spend a little time talking about things that have affected us here in our greater Joplin area. This morning, we're going to be talking a little bit with, since this is the 10th anniversary of the tornado, anybody that was living here at that point in time has memories and all those kinds of things. And sometimes people are still dealing with some of the after effects of those things. And so today we're going to be talking a little bit about PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder, and especially when that's hung on in some people's lives. So what might they be able to do in order to figure out, is that what they're dealing with, or what might they do for help? So we're going to be right back with Angie Fenske from the Renewed Mental Health, and we're going to be talking about that. So grab your coffee, settle in, and we're going to be right back after this Mercy Minute. Don't go away.
So dreading it so much because it was really no big deal. There was no pain afterwards. I was really, really hungry, so I got to have whatever I wanted to have for lunch. But the rest of the day I just slept, and there was no pain, and went to work the next day. Every day that I opened up my refrigerator and saw that referral on my refrigerator, I just dreaded having to go through it. And now I just kind of laugh about it because it was no big deal. And knowing it's behind me, I just don't have to worry about it. Well, my husband and I, we do a lot of riding, and we kind of cram everything into the weekends, but eventually, we'd like to, once we retire, we want to be able to go on vacations on our bikes and go riding on weekends a lot more, so we have a lot to look forward to.
Well, again, thanks for joining us for another Sunday morning of Faith in Our Hometown. My guest this morning, Angie Fenske, who is with Renewed Mental Health, social worker there. And so, Angie, I know it's been a while since you've been on the show. You were here while I was out on hiatus, and so it's nice to have you back. But the first time with me having a conversation. So even for my benefit and the benefit of our listeners, tell us again a little bit about yourself, a little bit about Renewed Mental Health, and what you do there.
Okay, I would love to. So I've been in Joplin since 1995, so I was definitely here through the tornado. I was real fortunate to be living about a half mile, out of the path.
Out of the strike zone, as I refer to it, yes.
But I did go and volunteer some and help and work with some people, and so I think everyone in this town got a little bit of what I would call secondary trauma.
Right. So even if you weren't immediately traumatized by it, we were all traumatized if we were here, and I agree with that wholeheartedly.
Yeah. So I talk about trauma more than I do PTSD. But anyway, a little bit more about me. I've got a daughter and 2 grandkids, and I enjoy the outdoors a whole lot. So I'm either around here on Shoal Creek or the trails nearby, or I'm out in Arkansas in the wilderness somewhere floating or hiking.
Good. Well, so that's what you do yourself to de-stress and to do those
absolutely.
things. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. Obviously, we've got some people who were traumatized, if you will, during that period of time. I do still hear stories from people about those long-term effects and those kinds of things. So have you worked with many of those folks in your practice that have had those long-term effects?
Oh, yes, absolutely. We worked with a lot of people with PTSD for various reasons. People can get PTSD from ongoing childhood abuse. They can get PTSD from wartime experiences, which is where it was really first identified.
Right.
And then natural disasters, sometimes car accidents. So PTSD, some of the symptoms, what we're talking about, it's post-traumatic stress disorder, and it can be a lifelong condition, but it's very treatable as far as the severity. And so some of the things that happen with that, some of the symptoms are being kind of always on edge. We talk a lot about the brain these days and whether we're in a regulated or dysregulated state. So if you're dysregulated, you've been triggered, maybe there's been a storm warnings come out, maybe there's a tornado warning even, and someone who is very deeply affected by the storm goes into this fight or flight place. Fight, flight, or freeze is what they call it. There's 3 different ways you can react. And it's the older parts of our brain, the reptilian brain, that are kind of in charge at that point.
Somehow I don't like thinking about myself with a reptilian brain, but that's
yeah,
okay.
You don't
I know
like
it's
the
got
terminology.
pieces there.
Yeah.
It's okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
And basically all that means for everybody who doesn't know what we're talking about is it's just like that's the part of us, like in a simple way, that just reacts to things.
Absolutely.
Rather than thinking it through and those higher levels of rationality and all that kind of good stuff. This is just like, what do you do when something happens to you, and how do you react?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the survival part. And it doesn't always roll rational, and it is hard to kind of talk it down from the ledge, so to speak.
Yeah.
So when we're in that dysregulated state, everything looks like danger. It's like you're kind of scanning the environment, and what kind of danger it can vary. It could be relational danger, like you might get your feelings hurt. It could be physical danger, like I could die from this tornado. It could be lots of different types of things, but you're kind of on high alert a lot of the time when you're in that state. And it makes it really, it's hard on your body physically, it's hard on your mind. It does quite a bit of damage to the whole body.
If you're always in that clutching on, kind of like, yeah.
So that's one of the symptoms.
So let's talk about that for a second,
Okay.
in terms of that. So you say it's hard on the body and hard on the mind. I think everybody can figure out how it's hard on the mind, but a lot of people might not understand what it does to the body. So why don't you talk a little bit about that for a second?
There's been lots of research, and I don't know that I have all that off the top of my head, but about adverse events, and how that can lead to big increases in high blood pressure, heart disease, depression, anxiety. Those things also affect the physical body, because they lead you a lot more prone to other kinds of illnesses, and people don't eat as well if they're depressed. So the mind and body are very connected, and that's what a lot of therapies are really focused on these days. So as a therapist, I have lots of different kinds of trauma therapies I might use. Very common basic stuff that most therapists use these days is about mindfulness, though. If you're in a place of having a PTSD kind of activated, dysregulated, what you want is to come back into this moment, not that moment back in 2011. And so mindfulness puts you right here and right now. And it's very simple stuff, like what do you see, what do you hear, what do you feel right now with your hand, it's just right here in this moment where your body is in your 5 senses.
Yeah. So this would be like somebody who is sitting in a restaurant, and all of a sudden the tornado sirens go off again.
Okay, yeah.
And that person might just really want to, be like, where is it at? What's going to happen to me? I could get smacked again.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. And you would teach them that where they are right now is not 10 years ago.
10 years ago,
but
absolutely.
where are you right now? And then how they might manage that a little bit, rather than just either freezing or running. Okay.
Yeah, some things to get out of their memories of the old event, and look around them and see what's going on right here, right now, and the people that they're with, and the age of the people they're with, and it brings them back into the present moment.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the simple aspects of that. There's a lot of different kinds of therapy. There's a lot more recent research on the mind-body connection. So more bringing in some energy work, which is something that I also do as a shaman and a therapist, to work with people who've had no luck with traditional talk therapy. Many of our therapists at Renewed Mental Health, the practice where I work, also do EMDR, which they've done a lot of research on EMDR as far as your trauma.
Spell that out for everybody.
It is eye movement and reprocessing.
Yeah.
Desensitization.
I know it sounds really
reprocessing.
strange, but several of my friends who are therapists have had some great luck with people who really get into those stressful situations. And if they can train them in terms of their eye movements, I mean, it sounds crazy to people. But so why don't you talk a little bit about that? Because I mean, most people aren't going to understand it unless they've had somebody who's tried it or done it or those kinds of things.
Well, I'm not an EMDR therapist, so I don't feel comfortable talking a whole lot about it. But it's really, the eye movement is really just about bilateral stimulation. So tapping can work as well. I don't know if they can see my hands on there, but tapping one side of the body and then the other stimulates one side of the brain and then the other. So while that bilateral stimulation is going on, and you are led to access certain memories, it desensitizes the emotions of that experience and helps you to reprocess it and integrate it in a different way.
Right.
And so many of the kind of other therapies that I might do with some guided imagery and the energy work in a similar fashion.
Right. So in other words, in some ways trying to say, okay, how can I, rather than just getting lost in where I was, how can I use these little tools, and I don't mean this in a bad sense, so it's not a value thing, but a gimmick or some kind of a way to trick myself into being able to pull out of where I might get stuck in a, in a whirlpool or something. It gets me to pull out of that so that I can process things a little bit better in the here and now.
Yeah, I have to process in the here and now. Although PTSD, one of its big symptoms that really makes it a disorder and not just having some trauma in your life is the avoidance part. And so a lot of people get real good at avoiding any reminders of what happened in many different ways. So if it's hard to avoid reminders of tornado warnings, but people turn off their TVs and their radios, and they silence the thing on their phones that tells them about it, and they tune out to all of that. They don't want to know. That's one possible way of avoidance. Another might be once they kind of get triggered that they kind of shut down. They go into that freeze mode and they completely dive into something else and don't listen to it. And so with the therapy and with some retreats that I want to talk a little bit about when we come back, there are a lot more ways to deal with the triggers and the symptoms if you face the trauma, if you have the courage to talk about the trauma to some extent with a therapist, or acknowledge it with yourself. Sometimes people don't even want to say out loud some of the traumas that they've witnessed, like what they saw or they smelled or they heard, or especially war vets. They're very strongly opposed sometimes to talking about some of that stuff.
Sure. Or people who were abused, don't want to go back and relive that. They want to, try to, not get trapped in that spot again.
Absolutely.
And figure out how to get on with life. And and that's very difficult when somebody's brought that kind of pain into somebody else's life, or when again people have been traumatized by whatever the trauma was. It's interesting to me in terms of these things. There are different methods. So you mentioned that you do more energy work. So say a little bit about that. I mean, just again, these are just ideas from people, or if you're thinking about, if you're struggling with something, or traditional things haven't helped. Sometimes these other things might be a way that might be able to do it. So say a little bit about the energy work.
So if someone comes to see me for energy work, there is less talking involved. They will talk a little bit, but as far as going into some of the details, that's one of the benefits of energy work. We're going to get down to a feeling, or something along those lines. And then we're going to work with the vibration or the energy of that feeling. So all the emotions are kind of like, sounds or colors. They have different vibrational frequencies. And so we want to identify that's most associated with the event for someone still, because they may have fear. Fear and terror may be the biggest fear, the feeling that's associated with it. But they may also have shame or guilt or, horror or all kinds of other things that are associated with this memory.
Yeah. So my guest this morning is Angie Fenske. Angie is a social worker who works with folks in terms of PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder, among other things, obviously. But we've been talking about a little bit in terms of recovery. We're going to be right back to talk a little bit about some retreat work and some of the other work that Angie's been doing to help people to get out of where they might be in terms of that. So stick with us. We're going to be right back after a real quick break.
You're watching Faith in Our Hometown on KSN TV, brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin.
Well, again, thanks for sticking with us this morning. Again, my guest, Angie Fenske, who is with Renewed Mental Health, And we were talking a little bit before the break about energy work and rapid eye movement stuff and all this tapping. All these, these are all little things that sometimes, therapists will use because they're trying to get us to hook a different kind of a response. than we would typically go into. And so, one of the things you would talk about, Angie, is that you've been doing some retreat work with people as well. Retreats are always good because it gives you a chance to step away and to really focus on something, whatever that something is. So why don't you tell us a little bit about those and what's been going on?
Okay, well, there's a couple of different types of retreats I do. One is a therapeutic retreat that is a partnership between Renewed Mental Health and my personal brand or business, Life Journeys. So those are supported by Renewed Mental Health, somewhat by the other therapists to come out and do that. We've just done that a couple of times, and those have been very beneficial for PTSD. That was really the group that we had before, was to work on some trauma and some extinguishing of those triggers. And then the retreats that I'm doing right now are under the Life Journeys, which is my personal business or brand headline, and those are a MESA program. So I'm a shaman as well as a therapist, and shamans are really, that's a long story, a whole nother conversation we could have.
Well, yeah, I heard you had some of that with Aaron Brown while I was gone, so that's good, yeah.
But the thing that's really relevant here is that as a shaman, I help people to heal their relationship with Mother Earth, Mother Nature. And so Mother Nature is who brought that tornado through here, and many of us have had kind of a fractured relationship with Mother Nature, I think, since then.
Ever since, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So the reconnecting with Mother Earth and using ecotherapy or nature-based therapy techniques. We meet at a retreat center at Shulkirk in Diamond, which is owned by the First Presbyterian Church. Right. And there's a creek there and lots of woods and outside stuff, and do a lot of some group talking and connection and exercise, but then also a lot of individual exercises where people are sitting on the ground and they're kind of using the earth as a canvas, and they make an earth painting. So they're in a way they're creating a circle out of sticks and things, and sitting there and working with this and placing things into this circle that they're really needing to change or let go of. And it is a retreat that runs like 4 days, one evening through the middle of the fourth day. And people get amazing transformation in that short amount of time. Yeah. I just love to see what happens at a retreat. People come in and they're nervous and they're anxious and they're really hurting pretty badly, sometimes at a place, kind of desperate place in their life. And when they leave, they've bonded and found a group of people that are supporting them, and they've reconnected with nature, and they're seeing purpose and hope and all kinds of possible things.
Well, and again, this works on so many different levels for people. Retreat's just an ancient spiritual practice anyway, where you just take some time away to kind of refocus and recalibrate life. And so you're offering that, as a way for people to heal or to connect or reconnect, if you will. And I think that it's, again, different people are going to function and thrive in different ways. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Somebody, I know some people who it's very healing for them to be out in nature. I know there are people that just don't seem to connect with it at all, and it's just kind of like, okay, so if it works for you, great. Now I would always tell my students when I was teaching exploring spirituality at Southeast Missouri State University, it's just like, okay, we're going to deepen some of your own practices, and we're just going to get you to stick your toe in the water of a few others, because the thing is, unless you stick your toe in some of that, you don't always know what might be helpful. So the beauty of that, as I see, is that somebody who might be heard or drawn to that, they can look you up on the web and maybe contact with you or whatever. But the nice part about that is that, again, different things work for different people. And I just think that for us to I'm been a Catholic priest for 35, but I mean, I got news for you. I know that way's not going to work for everybody. So I'd rather them still be on a spiritual journey. I'd rather them be attending to themselves as a person of spirit. And if my pathway is not going to work in that regard, then by all means, I just say go out and check out some other pathways so that you can find what is going to work for you.
Yeah, what I remember about world religions when I took it as a student, not from you, but many years ago, is there's
I've been teaching it about that long.
the resemblance, of so many different beliefs and world religions that that have so many similarities, really.
Well,
about
different
spiritual
connecting
principles.
points. Yeah, different connecting points. Because, I mean, let's face it. I mean, it would be a disservice to all of them to say, well, they're all the same. But there are pieces of each one that especially, and that's the fun part about studying world religions is, frankly, you can, just check out all of them and see what their cosmology, the way they look at the world is like, or, what's the relationship to the world, and, is there God, and does that God relate to that world, and what are all those connections? So again, same thing you were talking about, some people having a fractured relationship with, the earth because of the tornado.
Yeah.
Well, I got people out there who still have a fractured relationship with God
Because tornado.
God, in their world, at least let the tornado happen. And in some cases, in some people's way of thinking about God went, okay, I'm going to make the tornado now and here.
Right.
And everybody's got to contend with all that, and
Absolutely.
so, yeah. So
That's another symptom often of PTSD. It's be worded differently in the clinical books, but that spiritual crisis, that does come up.
Yeah.
Of wondering how God, Spirit, whoever let this happen.
Yeah. Why do bad things happen to good people?
Yeah,
and why do
absolutely.
good things happen to bad people? Both.
Yeah.
And there's no answer. There's no one answer to any of that. At least certainly in the way that I see that, because that just gets really complicated in the way people try to pull
Make
apart
sense
the
out of it.
threads of their lives, and when they're all caught up in a ball and you start pulling at threads. It's always
Messy.
an interesting exercise.
Yes.
It's always an interesting exercise, in terms of that. So let's talk about that for a second, because I mean that just kind of fascinates. It's the first time I've gotten to talk to you, so this,
Okay.
I'm just having fun here.
Okay, sure.
But I mean, I'm sure that for you, your shamanic practice, also informs your therapeutic practice, and I know you can
Yes.
keep them apart, but you can't help but, because of who you are, bring those other pieces, to the table when you're doing one or the other, I'm sure.
Oh, I could, not bring in much of that worldview, because I have, some of the skills and training to kind of compartmentalize and just provide the type of therapy somebody needs. But I definitely feel like I'm most effective when I bring in the nature therapy, when I bring in some of the shamanic perspectives or the guided imagery we call journeying, going on a journey in shamanism. And so often the suggestions that I'll make to people do have their roots in that, for sure, and helping people to kind of heal that relationship.
Yeah. I mean, it's, again, I mean, like I say, I can help people who aren't Catholic too.
Absolutely.
But if they let me pull some other tools from that bag, I'm usually better.
Yeah.
Because again, I'm dealing out of my strong suit. But I think that, we do. We're I think when we use all the pieces of us, and this is my Jay Friedel's prejudice coming out here.
Okay.
But sometimes we want to shunt off in our society. We want to shunt the spiritual off.
Oh, yeah. I
Because
agree.
it's
Yeah.
just like, because people don't know what to do with it. It's and again, I know it's messy, and I know that everybody's going to talk about it, and from their own experience and everything. But it becomes it's like trying to sit on this chair with three legs. Now
And
could
not
I
there.
sit on the chair with three legs? I could, but it's going to take an awful lot of energy to keep it balanced. I'll be doing a lot of leaning, if I'm trying to sit on a chair with three legs. If I include it, so if we look at the four legs as the physical, the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual, if I'm not paying any attention to the spiritual, that becomes problematic.
In my social work program, I was a master's of social work for training to be a therapist. Spiritual health was one of the 6 dimensions that we studied, and I absolutely agree with that. We have to be comfortable with addressing that with people.
Yeah, and I just always laugh because in the classes out at Southern, when I will talk to those classes, it's just like, again, sometimes they'll bring me in because it's just like we get uncomfortable talking about that dimension, and of course I can go in and talk about it on this big broad level, which is what I think we all ought to do, but I just always laugh because even in the textbook that they use. In the wellness model, yes, spiritual health is there, but they used to have a chapter in the book on spiritual health, and now the chapter's gone because they didn't know what in the world they were doing with it. So, yeah, I mean, I just find
I think spiritual health is absolutely, it's more like the glue that holds it all together, really.
Well, I mean, it is. And I mean, again, I don't want to reduce everything to I'm having an issue with this, or say I have PTSD. I don't want to denigrate it by saying, oh, just pray about it. Okay, so that's not,
Right.
that's not necessarily always the solution either. But if we can work on it therapeutically, at the same time, maybe learn some of those other skills and bring the prayer or all those things into it, I think we've got a much more winning proposition with most of the people who would want to do those things.
Yeah, and people need help. If they're still kind of experiencing a lot of trauma whenever the storm sirens start going off in the spring, we can help you with that. At Renewed Mental Health, I can help you with that. If you want to come to a retreat, you can just go to angiefenske.com and read about it if it's something you're interested in. It is a little foreign and exotic for this area, although as a Catholic priest, I would think you might be interested in, because my shamanic training comes out of Peru. And so they very well have mixed Catholicism and the indigenous shamanism. It's all
true.
very much combined and one and the same. And that you go to the cathedral, and you also are visiting an ancient rock.
Well, my guest this morning, Angie Fenske, talking a little bit about how to recover from trauma from a variety of different places. And we're going to be right back after this Mercy Minute.
Blessings and greetings of mercy to you. My name is Anna Nichols. I am a Sister of Mercy and currently the leader of Heritage and Spirituality at Mercy International Association. I love the fact that sisters throughout time have gone where they have been called to go, and they have often picked up ministries that they never intended to pick up. 25 years ago, there were 22,000 Sisters of Mercy globally. Today we're down to about 6,200 with Sister Rock and some of the others. But despite the fact there are 6,500 or 6,200 sisters left, there is an amazing number of women and men of mercy who are working alongside us, and that continues to expand and expand, and for me that is incredibly exciting. So as far as National Catholic Sisters Week, I really look at the legacy that they have passed on, and the fact that so many women, men, young people are living mercy today. That really is for me what's significant.
Well, my conversation this morning was with Angie Fenske, who is a social worker here in the Joplin area. The fun part about the conversation for me is seeing, that we as human beings sometimes need some healing or some help in some of those areas. And one of the things I think we talked about this morning in a way that I think was very indicative of all the different pieces of us is that sometimes we need a little help in one of those areas or another. And there's different ways to get at that. And I just want to say to all of you out there who are struggling with any part of who you are, physical, emotional, spiritual, just go and maybe try something that you haven't tried before. Open yourself up to another way of healing, perhaps. So at any rate, I hope you have a great Sunday. Come back and join us next Sunday for Faith in Our Hometown.
Thanks for watching. Faith in Our Hometown can be seen Sunday mornings at 6:30 and 9 a.m. on KSN. Brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin.